Welcome to Power Hour, where the editors of Powersports Business interview the movers and shakers of the industry. This episode is brought to you by Synchrony. Brendan from Powersports Business, and we're here today with another Power Hour, and we've got Rob Hefner, who is the Senior VP of Powersports Division at Riders Advantage and APCO. So APCO recently acquired Riders Advantage earlier this year, but Riders Advantage has been around for quite a while, and so we welcome Rob.
Good to be here. Yeah, thanks for taking
Christmas,
the time today.
Yeah. So I don't know when this is coming out exactly. It hopefully will be, soon, but it's always weird saying like, oh, welcome to, and then you see it a couple weeks later, like after Christmas or something, yeah. And you're like, what are they talking about? This so
that's okay.
Yeah, so you've been with Riders Advantage. You started it, correct? You were the founder of it, and give me a little bit of your background, your history. How did you get into power sports? What was your claim to fame, as so to speak, as a F&I guru and power sports professional?
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I'll give you kind of the condensed version of it, but basically my retail experience goes all the way back to the late 80s. So things were a lot different in F&I. Back then it was mostly a fax machine and a lot of different strategies that you wouldn't necessarily use today to put
Did they have F&I? I mean, I guess they did have F&I.
So F&I in the late 80s into the early 90s, really F&I was created in the 70s. And it really started with extended service contracts. And then you had the addition of credit life and credit disability, two products that aren't really marketed in the industry anymore. And so the early way in which you presented F&I products is inherently different than the way that you would now. So we really didn't see, a lot of it was just kind of the old assumable close, which you'd get in a lot of trouble for doing now, where you just assumed it, didn't necessarily disclose that to them. And as long as they took the payment, obviously there's some ethical dilemmas when you consider that. But that was kind of a lot of the process back in those early days. And it started with extended service contract, credit life, credit disability. Then GAP came onto the marketplace, some appearance protection, the permanent plate. I think about some of the movies I see. I'm trying to remember the movie where one of the actors is saying, hey, and there's from up in Minnesota, he's saying, hey, make sure you buy that undercoating, and so that was, we'll give you $100 off that, and so there was just that crazy,
like
that crazy world that power sports dealers, they don't want to be that, right? They don't want to be considered like auto dealers. And that kind of takes you back to that period of time, but that's the way it was. Really, I worked in retail, and then I actually worked for a lender that did nothing but indirect automobile financing. So I was calling on auto dealers primarily. And I would see these guys that had come in and they would really help develop F&I departments. And early on, this is going way back into the 90s. Early on, I really wanted to kind of be that guy versus what I was doing. At the same time, I started to see the emergence of GAP as an additional product, additional benefit to our customers that evolved into the auto industry. And so I made that evolution from a sales rep or a lender rep and buying paper, forming relationships with our dealer partners, to becoming a F&I trainer, if you will. This is still on the auto side. We're still in the 90s. So I'll make it a lot shorter in this chronology, right? But otherwise it get really, really boring. So I did that, started developing the processes in the late 90s, started to evolve to auto dealers using a menu. Although that menu was a lot different than what you see today. It was basically a 3-box menu that you hand wrote in, and it was really more of a closing tool than it was a compliance tool, but it was disguised as a compliance
tool. Those guys sitting there drawing out the square, the 4 square kind of menu, hey, where do you want to be here,
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it was. And it said customer repayment options, mandatory disclosure, and the like. And so the turn of the century comes around, and it's funny, the turn of the century, all extended service contracts had an exclusion for anything related to Y2K. And so again, it was just a different time. We all didn't know what was going to happen, if you remember. And so the turn of the century happens, and I'm doing my thing. I'm at this point, I'm out on my own as an agency, if you will. And I walk into my first power sports store in 2003 here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I live. And I just immediately liked the culture, which I already knew because I was an enthusiast, but I liked the culture. I liked everything about it. And just having the types of conversations that I would have with auto dealers that didn't always resonate with them resonated with power sports dealer. And my personality and who I am just was so much better suited for the power sports market.
Okay, that's interesting.
And so for me, it was from the very get-go, what I felt like I understood was that there was a niche, a very strong opportunity to the right way, the ethical way, a fully compliant way to really bring some level of development that really there wasn't anybody out there doing in our particular space, except for a few independent guys that had products.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that from 2003 up to 2008, and you're still maintaining some of my other business and other channels. And so in 2008, if you remember, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, but a lot of the people that view this will remember, we were selling a lot of motorcycles, gas prices up through October of 2008. And then October 2008 hit, and then the bottom fell out. The derivatives and all the things. We've all seen the movie The Big Short, right? Yeah. And so we all know what happened. And a great movie if people haven't seen it.
Yeah, it is a good movie. Yeah.
Yeah. But so November hits and the bottom falls out. And dealers were having to close their doors. Before that, dealers were having great success, and most of the dealers in the power sports industry still didn't really feel comfortable with this F&I, or this finance and insurance process. Dealers are in power sports, and one of the things that attracted me to the industry is they're just solid people, and they're likable, they're enthusiasts, and they're in the business for the right reasons. And I loved that. But for me,
it's
now here we are. Yeah, here we are in 2008, and dealers have got to be able to do certain things they weren't doing before just to stay in business.
Yeah.
And so
we lost a lot of dealers during that time. I remember, and I just came in right after like 2009, but I remember there was like, maybe 30% or something like that. A big number. I think
it's accurate.
Yeah.
I think it's literally were that many dealers, and the dealers all of a sudden, dealers that would have said prior to 2008, I don't want to sell those warranties, or I don't want to sell any of that, gimmicky stuff or whatever it may be. Now they realize that was a really important profit center revenue generator. So albeit with really low retail volume, I started to see my business grow and my business model really starting to make more sense to the dealer network out there. And so started to build the business, and then turn the page to somewhere around 2012, 2013, I was completely in power sports, which is what I wanted to do. So at that point, all the auto stuff I kind of farmed out, and then just, and so I was completely in power sports and just continued to build the business until we consolidated all of our operations into one ownership back some years ago. And that kind of took us up to the point where we were acquired by APCO recently.
Yeah. Now so tell me about that. That was in what, July or just this?
Yeah,
past,
very good. So
I just, I had to relook at the press release. I think it was on your site, but I remember we ran something about it, and I was like, oh, okay. Right. And I was kind of thinking, I'm like, is Rob still there? I'm just wondering, did you sell? Are you gone? So I'm happy you stayed, that you're still part of all that. So, and maybe that's, but explain a little about how that happened.
Yeah. So obviously when you are experiencing or have the blessing of year-over-year growth and revenue, this term that my wife hates when I use this term, but the term EBITDA, because it just sounds so kind of weird.
I know, I see that a lot, and I'm still, maybe you can enlighten us a little about what EBITDA is, because I still look it up all the time. It's in a lot of the financial stuff that we run. I'm like, is that important? Do I need to run that? So yeah.
Yeah, it's important, but versus getting watered down in the formulary to determine the overall EBITDA, really what dealers and what companies would need to concentrate on more than that. It's just their net cash flow or the net revenue,
Hmm.
right? So it's one thing to have gross sales of X. You can have gross sales of 50 million, but if your net revenue is 1.5 million, then there's something
Right.
wrong there, and that's going to have an adverse effect on your
You got a
overall
lot of
EBITDA.
expenses. Yeah, right. A lot
Yeah,
of
but
debt.
EBITDA
Yeah.
is going to consider liabilities and all the other things into a formula. But at the end of the day,
Okay.
the biggest factor of that is going to be your net revenue. And so for us, as we continue to grow in that model, thanks to the success of our dealer and trust that our dealer partners gave us, we were approached. Gosh, I mean, I don't think I would be exaggerating when I said a good 2.5 years ago, probably 3 years ago originally, actually before that, but about acquisition. And we were approached by 3 or 4 different entities. Private equity that,
Yeah.
we all know what private equity is. And basically these were folks that were making fair offers, and they were all private equity firms. And we listened to them, but at the end of the day, it wouldn't be a good fit for us because I got a lot of gas in the tank. And
Yeah.
and
You're
and
not
for
looking to
me,
retire yet,
yeah, I'm not looking to. I know this sounds almost contradictory to why people sell their companies, but I'm not really looking to sell off into the sunset. Although I like to do that a lot. But
Yeah.
I'm looking to continue. There's a lot of gas in the tank, and I think there's a lot of opportunity still in a space in a market that really needs the things that we bring to the table. And so when those private equity companies came to us, it really the multipliers were good and we were happy and that was great, but it really wasn't a good recipe for selling the company because really they don't know the industry. They're not even in a related trade most of the time,
Right.
right? And so we see that model and all those horror stories that are related to that. And so
They
we
want to
really
just
didn't
squeeze everything out of it,
and then they
yeah.
and then they have bad ideas. They don't let you really run the business. They bought your revenue, they bought you to run the business, and then they don't let you do that.
Right.
Well, APCO, I won't go into the details of how it came around, but a year ago, or actually it's been longer than that now, 18 months ago, when the conversation started, I was aware of APCO and I was aware of who they are in the business. So APCO has got two different administrators on the auto side. They have a very large presence.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
APCO is a 850 plus employee company, but
Wow.
almost everything that they do is related to what I do. And so it made
Okay.
sense. They know the inning and they know the score. And their approach to us was not like private equity. It was, we want you to keep doing what we're doing. We're smart enough to know we're not going to get in your way. That's the reason we're buying you. And so, with exception of a few of our employees here at Riders, so there were two companies were acquired because we had two companies, Riders Advantage and Capital
Okay.
Administrative Professionals, which was our
Okay.
administration company, which remains today intact in Columbus, Ohio. And so, for us, everybody at Cap remained in place. I had a couple of people that didn't stay during the transition, and we've made those replacements. But my core people, the people that really important, from Rich Butler, my national sales manager,
Yeah. Yep.
from Kristen Sullivan, now Kristen Howison, who's my senior regional sales manager, people, Lori Hepler, our senior sales support, all these people have been with me 7, 8 years. All of those people stayed through. They're excelling. They're doing great. But APCO is just the right fit,
Yeah.
and I didn't have to sell off to the sunset. Contrary to that, I'm working as hard as I ever have. So maybe I didn't expect that, but here,
Right.
hey, you just got to lay our ears back and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it a new challenge is always good a lot of time, but it's also about the balance, the fit of everything, and I've been through different, never owned, well, I've owned but never to your level, but it's like having that right situation means everything. And whether you're working hard or not
Yes.
doesn't necessarily feel like that because it's the right situation, you know. Um, so, yeah. But you'll get time to, I know you got a boat to go sail off on every now and then, so you get to recharge those batteries and keep some gas in the tank, you know. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, and yeah, so I mean, I guess the thing is, yeah, you're still involved. It's still the same company basically. You just have a parent kind of over you that's, you
Yeah,
know,
I get to it in that those opportunities, that creates more opportunities. We've already had some synergies within the organization that there's no way I could have achieved by myself. And so that
right.
we expect will allow for even more growth than I could have achieved. Our approach was just to get out and do the work every day, be of value to the dealer, and everything else would take care of itself. Well, there's some higher level synergies that we have now that will promote that growth even further, which is
Oh
super
yeah.
exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So give me a little bit in a your take on the industry right now, on F&I industry, and what you see, because you guys deal with a lot of dealers, you do a lot of training, a lot of F&I training, and other things. You're in kind of seeing the health of these dealers. What do you see
Yeah.
coming up, and where we're going from here to get to there?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing is, and I think everybody sees this, is we had a time during COVID where the inventory was sparse, the demand was high, and you sold everything that you had in your inventory immediately at just about any reasonable
It's like
price, and
wiped out your
sometimes not
store, like,
reasonable.
up, take it off the wall.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, with that being said, we it was a very lucrative time for our industry, and that was great. However, once we got through COVID and COVID was officially declared, in the past in a rearview mirror, then at that point, the model moved very quickly, probably even further than it was pre-COVID, to OEMs really lining dealerships' walls with inventory, really going back to kind of not
Like,
promoting, but ending up promoting heavy discounts, kind of what we call a race to the bottom. And so there was an interesting piece of data that I looked at the other day, and you look at all the departments in a power sports dealership: service, parts, new sales, used sales, all the above. But when you look at F&I, that's where you see the biggest disparity. And still to this day, I see it as a massive opportunity to really benefit and work with dealer partners to advance the F&I income stream. And what I mean by that is when you looked at this graph, it basically told you how many dealerships were receiving part of their net revenue from F&I. And it was capped at like 50% of the dealers nationwide were
oh,
actually realizing net revenue. But 10% of the dealers found that net revenue in F&I was their leading net revenue generator.
oh,
And so what dealers that are really really savvy in F&I, what they understand is if they're successful in F&I, they're going to be able to, and I don't suggest they do this, I never support the model, but they're kind of leading the charge. And kind of like that 2008, if you're not successful in F&I, you're going to sell less units as well. So F&I has a direct correlation to your overall retail sales volume in a race to the bottom type environment. And so
ah,
recognizing that and seeing where that trending is today, F&I is definitely as important as it's ever been. And we continue to maintain a business philosophy and a business model that if we can be a part of that dealer's F&I department where we can help them build, we can put processes in place that the dealership wants us to do, and he or she supports us, then that's really where we see our model moving forward, more so than ever. And so just like any other company, we've always tried to hire better and better people with higher acumen.
yeah,
That's kind of the evolution of a company. You start out with who you can get, and I've lived
yeah,
those
yeah,
times, right?
right, right.
But And there were some great individuals that were instrumental in our growth. But now we're really looking for individuals on the Riders Advantage team that have a high acumen, have an F&I pedigree that can come in and make an impact. And I feel like we've built that team better than ever, and we're starting to build that model. And so really where we see a blue ocean remaining in our space and what we do that ever is by creating a mutually beneficial relationship between the dealer and our company versus just really being a vendor. We can always be a vendor, but that's not really what we want to be. That's really
You want to be a
not. There's
partner. You want to be a, yeah.
100%. We want to feel good about ourselves, not
And
just having an inexpensive cost or things of that nature.
so F&I seems like something, I mean, you always see F&I training. If I now backtrack a little bit
Yeah.
about your statement about these, 10% of dealers having that high revenue model. Is that something new, different right now in our times because of too many units on the floor maybe, or just that they see that as the best way to gain the revenue,
That's a good question, Brendan. What I don't know the answer completely. I don't know the data prior,
Yeah.
so I'm speculating. Here's the trend that we're seeing. So in power sports, we're seeing more and more dealers become part of 20 groups.
Yeah. Oh
For
yeah.
those that don't know, 20 groups are consultative in nature. You take 20 dealers that are not competing against each other in an individual market that have the same volume or meet certain criteria. It's hard to match them all up.
Yeah.
But in these 20 groups, it is really, really a F&I is a high discussion. You spend a lot of time talking about F&I. And so we're starting to see, I think, more of that kind of the elevation of that revenue stream with those dealers as we're seeing, and it's consistent and
More
parallel.
education that's happening, I think,
There's more
because
education.
yeah,
The
the
other trend that we're
education.
seeing, the other
Yeah.
trend that we're seeing is a term called reinsurance. And
Okay.
so you
Yeah.
take those two, and reinsurance is basically realizing significantly more additional profit doing the same by just developing that F&I process and then being able to retain the underwriting profit from those contracts yourself.
Oh.
And there's always been a lot of misconceptions about that model, but that's starting to become a big topic at these 20 group organizations as well. And so those myths that are starting to be dispelled as well. And so the net result of that is,
Wouldn't that be competing against you though? I mean, if you're the reinsurance people, they're like, "Oh, I'm going to just do it myself."
well, in a good question. Yeah, because obviously, why would I promote that too? I mean, certainly we need to have revenue to be successful. But what we learned a long time ago, so really when it comes to offering reinsurance in the power sports industry, we were one of the first ones out there that were really doing that. Some of the others that are out there really don't take up a large part of the space anymore. They've kind of realized that power sports is not necessarily, as much where they want to hang their hat. And so they've moved back in the auto side.
It's a niche, I mean, compared to
Yeah.
the automotive market, people come and go. It seems like the ones that stick here are the ones like you that want to be here and are not
Yes.
looking to like, oh, look at all that green grass over in the automotive side, or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I think that and yeah, there's a lot to be said about the people that stick in this industry. Um, but that said, yeah, the reinsurance thing is an interesting topic. I think that's come up more lately. I mean, I've in the last couple of years anyway, for me that I've heard about, but I just don't really get how, unless you're, and your company can probably provide some of those vehicles or whatever the contracts or whatever for
Yeah.
a power sports company to do it themselves, but then they're doing it all themselves. Is it more work as a reinsure to do reinsurance or what?
Well, generally speaking, the misconception about that topic and that profit center is just lack of education. And again, these 20 groups are starting to educate those people more. But
Yeah.
the reality is that the general structure that power sports dealers are using we remain the contract, the person on the contract, or the party of the contract. And so let's talk about an extended service contract for a minute. So you have us as the administrator, and you have the individual customer who purchases the product, right? Those are the contracting parties. And so the dealership has no liability under the terms and conditions of that contract, even in a reinsurance scenario. So it's a little bit of a misnomer in the fact that
Okay.
so what they're really doing is we're insuring the risk ultimately. And so they're not on the hook for the risk. So they kind of get to, have their cake and eat it too. And so they get the underwriting profit, and they get any investment income related to the underwriting profit. And the reason that we do that, because I get this question all the time, is why would you do that? I mean, what's in it for you? We
Right.
recognized a long time ago that this is, again, having come from the auto industry where this is a lot more prevalent, we understood that there was a competitive need for that in power sports. And we felt like that, albeit at a smaller margin, we felt like that we brought the best trend, the best profit opportunities to dealers, and we educated them and spent the time knowing that we were going to make less money, then that relationship and that reciprocity would take care of itself in the end. And that's what we did. And so, yes, obviously, if we're giving the dealership the underwriting profit and the investment income, we're going to make less money. I understand that, but it's really the best way to play it for a long-term partnership. And
Gotcha.
so that's the reason we introduced it years and years ago. We're seeing other folks in the space offer it now, which is great.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that maybe you're making less profit, but you've also gained a kind of a partner you can do like training with. You've got other programs you can probably work with them on as well. But, it's more of keeping a healthy dealer there. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's still a lot of dealers that just are not up to speed with F&I and all that, that you can still, there's still a lot of fish in the sea, to be able to, you know, even in this little
Yeah.
market that we have, Yeah.
And that's, I know this sounds crazy, but that's still one of the things that I love about this market is you've just got good people. The
Yeah.
ones that understand F&I, that are successful in F&I, those folks are salt of the earth. But yes, there are dealers that still are very cautious in the way that they run their business, and so they still have
Or maybe
some
old school. I
conceptions.
think some of them are old school enough that
Definitely old
maybe they're
school.
like, well, we've always done it this way. And, my grandfather started this dealership and he was fine without F&I, or
Absolutely.
whatever. Yeah. So you probably hit some of those every now and then. But I think that tide is, you've got a new generation of people coming in, kids running it, and other people that are more business savvy in that, I shouldn't say that the grandparents weren't business savvy, but for the times they were. But into modern times,
100%.
things are changing enough. So, yeah.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I mean, back then when the grandparents were running the dealership, F&I wasn't a thing. You
No,
had other
not,
departments, but now it's, I mean, when you think about F&I, it's really the most profitable department in your dealership by square footage. And so not to realize or recognize that income at any level at all, which we still have some of those dealers that are doing, is really, I just see it more of an education process. But
yeah.
here's the thing too. If I'm a dealer, I've been there for years, I own the building, and I love what I do, and I decide that if I'm going to really become more active and aggressive in the marketplace, try to sell more retail units, things of that nature, then I really just want to sell the dealership. I think you have some dealers with that type of mentality. And you know what? I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
That's their decision to make. That's their business. They've spent a lot of years through a lot of generations, multi-generationally, to be
Yeah,
successful in that business at the level that they are. So I respect
we're
that.
seeing a lot of that transfer now of, dealerships that have been in a family for so long, or they're like, okay, we're
Yes,
out
sir.
now. And I don't know if it's always,
Yes, sir.
is it the times we're in? I think it's just there's more availability and more people wanting to come in. And actually, just talking to somebody recently who you probably know, George. Chaconis, he was like,
Yep.
well, there's more guys coming in that got out, and now the values are coming down and they're coming back in, you know?
Yeah,
So,
I
you
had a,
know,
there was I can't tell you where the store is or what the store is, but an interesting story along those lines. We had a store that had sold to a new owner. The new owner came in and realized that he didn't know power sports, right? And so he ended up
yeah.
selling back to the original owner at a lower cost. And so you're just seeing all
Yeah.
kinds of crazy
It's like
trends, you know, and
buy
good for,
high, sell
good for
low.
him.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so
But the
you
owner's
I
like,
mean,
okay, sell high, buy low. Okay.
yeah, I mean,
That's a
there's a
good
perfect
plan.
example. I mean,
Yeah.
good for him. I mean, that was successful, but yeah, there's a lot of those trends. But another trend that we're seeing that really is a little cautionary to those dealerships that still don't want to take on the F&I process is we're seeing a trend of auto dealers buying more power sports stores. And it's gaining more
And those
momentum
guys
than we've
have
ever
their
seen.
F&I down pretty much, you know.
They understand that F&I is extremely important to the overall success of the dealership. And so they're going to promote F&I in that store. And the problem is if I can sell a machine for X because I've got an opportunity to generate revenue in F&I and the next store can't compete with that, then I'm going to sell more units and the other store is going to ultimately sell less units.
Yeah.
And so it's it's just, I don't know that it's good or bad. It's just a trend that we're seeing more than we've ever seen in the history of my experience in the business in the last 20 or however long that was since
I
'03.
mean,
But
I you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think though there's a lot. It can either be because you know you're going to sell the F&I, you can make some profit there, so you can come in with a little lower price, but also dealer margins are down from, you know, selling new units
yes, sir.
anyway. So you have to find new revenue streams. As a dealer to make it today, there has to be more revenue because you're not making it off of just selling new units, you know. And then if you're not offering F&I, somebody can undercut you, you know. There's a lot of those kind of things that, you know, it's going to make it
Yes.
much more difficult. And the automotive guys coming in, they understand the process of selling a vehicle, you know. Most, not, I shouldn't say all, but I think most of those big groups, they know what they're doing, you know. They
They
know
do.
enough of what they're, but you know, they're also some automotive techniques. It's remains to be seen how well that translates into power sports, but you know,
Well, yeah, I mean, what I would say is this: when we think about the power sports industry versus the auto industry, I say this, and a lot of people say this, it's very much the same, but it's also very different. And
yeah.
so it's always tough for dealers and for guys like me to think that we would develop some of those strategies that come from the auto side. We as a market and as a culture, at all cost, I hope that we would preserve that culture. And that culture is preserved by having the right people within the organization. So not every person that comes over from the car business is a good person to put in a power sports store.
Right.
I mean, and so often dealers make the mistake of taking that person that has that that attitude, right?
Right.
And bringing them into
It's a little
to
more
the
high
industry that we
paced, a little
love.
bit. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is an industry that we love. This is not something power sports industry is not something we just brought on to make money in. It's an industry that we love and we know and we're passionate about. And so being able to bridge that gap, maintain those processes in a way that's compatible in our industry verse and is really going to require the right person, the person that has a good inflection and tone, really knows the business, is
Hmm.
passionate about the business, and yes, they want to be successful. They're going to follow a process, but they're also going to have fun, and they're not going to get upset when certain things happen that they don't want to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I do think that yeah, I mean, it's going to be a because of all the shifting and moving, we're going to get a little bit more auto like in certain ways. And I think dealers have a lot, you know, whether you're selling a car or a motorcycle or a RV or a boat, there's certain things that we all have in common, you know, of course. You
No doubt
know,
about it.
it's just how we do it. You know, the cars are like, you know, people come in because they need it. You know, they got to go to work. Um, you're not coming into a power sports dealership to, you know, necessarily buy something to go to work on. You know, I mean, maybe in certain places you are, but yeah, it's like this is a toy. This is a big a moment in your life. You know, you're like, I'm buying something fun. So, you know, like I always
100%.
say, we're here to sell the fun. We're here to sell the fun. And it's so because of that, it's a lot different pace. It's a different kind of style. And I think like you kind of nailed it on the head. That's what really made me love this industry even more because I was on the automotive side too. And, you know, I worked in different areas and stuff, but just the people in this industry and just the way they are, you know, inspiring and you just kind of, you kind of feed off of each other, you know? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, is there, you know, any kind of innovations in F&I coming? I see you guys have like a digital menu kind of stuff and things like that. Are there other innovations or things coming to the F&I world, do you think, in the next few years? How about AI? Is that going to be, will that put us all out of business or, you know, I don't know.
Well, the thing about the process in F&I that kind of protects those people that are in that process. I mean, there are some cutting edge things that are out there that are available, and those can even, you know, with some of the synergies that we have with APCO, we make those available. But you know, in terms of AI, the thing about AI, when you think about the F&I process, which really starts with something we call the customer interview, that's really driven by that individual and by that relationship that they form. And so when you look at the dealership, power sports dealerships across the country, probably 10% of them actually have what we call an effective customer interview. And that's really paramount in optimal success for F&I, but it also sets the tone for what we would call the customer loop or whatever it may be. And all that being said, you can't really do that with AI. And there is
Yeah.
some AI that can be incorporated into, and we're looking at these things, but I'm an old school guy, maybe to a fault, but we have great digital technology in that menu process. And we felt early on that we wanted to partner and we partner with multiple menu providers, but our premier partner through iTab. They were kind of the first to the scene that really got outside of the auto box in terms of menu and created a digital platform that was more suited to a power sports F&I process.
Oh, okay.
And so
Yeah.
we've had a relationship with those guys for years, and we've used that, and that's been incredibly successful. And so we don't see ourselves moving. I mean, we've continued to advance that technology, or I'm sorry, iTab. We can't take credit for that, but yeah, is there some research being done as to how AI may incorporate into that? Yes, but do I see it as a short term, you know, over the short term? Probably not so much.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like AI, you know, again, it's hard to replace that um person to person kind of, you know,
Right.
you're as the guy that's interviewing the person, you're getting a feel of what that person wants and all, you know, maybe you know, who knows what it will develop into over the years, but me personally, you know, do you want to really interact? You don't really feel emotions or things off of you
That's
know,
right.
AI, you know, so
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's hard. And I feel like what we're in is a very emotional business. It's an emotional buy, you know, what you're buying. It's not, you know, if you're really thinking about it rationally, you might not buy it. You know what I mean? You're like,
Well,
do I really need it? You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
You
Well,
might
I
not
mean, you
buy
get
it, but I don't
excited,
need
you
that
know.
motorcycle. I could put it into my kid's education or something like that, you know?
There's
But
always
no, we
that.
still
There's
buy
always
these
that.
things. Yeah, yeah.
You know, when you think about when you think about the customer that walks through the front door, right? So they walk in, they're excited about the machine. I mean, almost everybody's excited, unless they're the farmer
Yeah,
that's buying it for work and they're going to take bonus
right. Maybe,
depreciation, right? Well, they may still be excited, you know, but
sure.
but at the end of the day, what we know about the products that are sold in the F&I office is people don't walk in the front door and say, hey, the salesman greets them and they say, hey, wait, is that F&I guy here? We want to talk to him about an extended service contract.
Right.
I'm super excited.
Right.
People don't get excited about those products, right? But what we generally know is that if somehow, and we can't, but if somehow we could provide those products no cost to the consumer, now all of a sudden 100% of those consumers would be excited about it, right? Now they're paying attention. Yeah. And so because of that, I really, again, back to this AI thing, and I know it's a big topic conversation.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to say that I'm not in the know on AI. It's not.
I'm trying to learn, but yeah,
it's tough.
It's
tough. It's just, and it just changes every day, it seems like.
Yeah.
But until something changes when you're selling those type of products to consumers or offering those type of products to consumers, I just don't see AI being able to carry that out in a way that makes sense in terms of a retail process. Now, if it was an automated process or a follow-up process where you understand that you're going to get a low percentage, yeah, what happens. There's probably a place for it there. But in terms of in-store and a power sports store where we want to sell the enthusiasm, the excitement, we want to take care of the customers individually and personally when they have issues, because that's who we are as an industry. I think it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. But yeah, so I think your job's safe for a while, and hopefully mine is.
Yeah. Then I may be forced to sail off into the sunset.
But then you've already got the boat, so you're all ready to go. So
we'll just jump on and go.
Just jump on and go.
Yeah. I'd rather just continue to do this as long as I can.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time here, and this is great talking to you and catching up and learning more about the F&I world and just kind of your viewpoint perspective. You've been around this industry for a long, long time and see a lot of things. So, I think our viewers, our audience will appreciate it as well. So thanks. And we'll probably see you in January at our conference.
Yes, sir.
So we're looking forward to that. Yeah.
Always
absolutely.
good to see you, Brendan.
If you like this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We also invite you to connect with us on powersportsbusiness.com.